Welcome back to TV6's news coverage of the St. Joseph by-election. Now, unofficial word that we have gotten is that the PNM has won the seat, Mr. Dialsingh, with 6,300 plus votes, with the UNC about 5,500 votes. That is unconfirmed, but I think the supporters here believe that Mr. Dialsingh has won the seat. Now, we are still awaiting the arrival of Mr. Dialsingh, who is expected here shortly, as well as opposition leader Dr. Keith Rowley, to get an idea of if it has in fact been declared that Mr. Dialsingh has won the seat. So, as you can see behind me, there's a lot of people here already celebrating, haven't gotten the news, or so they believe that Mr. Dialsingh has become is victorious in the St. Joseph by-election. And we will keep you up to date. So we're going to cross back over to studio. Fane?
Thank you very much, Mark. We're going to show you a slide that gives us a sense of what the preliminary results are so far this evening. These are not verified. These are the results that are coming out of the three political camps where we have our team stationed. And you can see why at this point, at this juncture, the PNM is taking the opportunity to celebrate. Almost 5,000 votes at this point in for the PNM, as according to preliminary results. These have not been verified by the returning officer. In this chart, we're seeing that Ian Allen is about 500 votes behind. We heard Jewel Brown earlier talking about the theory that some of his sources told him with regards to the ILP candidate clocking around 2,000 votes and what that may or may not do for the PNM. Well, Umlala has edged closer and closer to that 2,000 mark in this preliminary results chart. Just to take a look at how this compares with the verified results, you're going to see a significant gap. We're about almost 1,000 votes behind in the count on the verified results. This puts PNM's Terrence Dialsingh just hovering below the 4,000 vote mark. Ian Allen chasing him very close on his tail with 3,700 votes or so. So you see the discrepancy there. We're looking at preliminary results showing that there's about a 400 vote lead over for PNM's Terrence Dialsingh. The lead is about 200 votes here on the verified results. Of course, verified results are what's coming out of the returning officer's office. Martin, back to you.
Thank you, Fane. And one thing that is interesting, Dr. James, and I want to take you straight to this. I know you have another point you wish to make, but I want to take you straight to the comment that came from the Minister of Food Production, Mr. Devon Mirage, when he referred to the ILP as the spoiler party. And I know Indira would also want to have her say on that. Does this actually end up having the reverse effect of empowering the ILP even more? Because in other words, you are making it clear to them that they do have the power to make or break you in elections. And the more you emphasize this idea of the split vote, the more empowered the ILP can become. Your take on this?
Well, I agree with the second conclusion you arrived at, that you have demonstrated that you are a force to be reckoned with and that you need to deal with me. That is the UNC. I do not agree that they are the spoiler party, because to agree would suggest that the votes that the Umlala has polled are votes that really historically belong to the UNC, which is not true. These things happen when you have partnerships. With the disappearance of the partnership, the equation has changed. And the change in that equation leaves us wondering how the votes that Umlala has polled are constituted. Are they new voters entirely? Are there people who voted for the first time in 2010 and who are saying, okay, now we're not giving those votes to the partnership of which UNC is a part? We have reverted, really, to the ethnic bases. We have reverted to the marginality. You know, of course, that there is a 10% real gap between the two parties, of course. And it's working out to be very close here, something like 55-45.
Yes.
Which is marginality for you.
Yes. Let's hear Indira.
When we look at our history with third parties, what we're seeing is no different from what we saw with the COP, with the ONR. So it is the same pattern. So for any political party, regardless of how entrenched you are, to suggest that those votes belong to you and that third force has no right to it is very rude in my view and very much out of place.
It's unrealistic.
And yes, and I think really our leaders need to take stock of that. They also need to take stock to the next reality. We're almost on the doors of the 2015 election, and obviously, as currently obtained, for any other party than the PNM to stand a chance at winning that election, coalition must be the model.
On what basis?
That's correct. So how are you now? Obviously, if the ILP does not disappear tomorrow, if Mr. Warner decides to work on this momentum that he has garnered, and to, even if he's at third force that is significant enough that he must be negotiated with, how are you going to negotiate with him? How are you going to change the rhetoric so that you can in fact do so? Because
and how are you going to persuade the public to support another model
that's right.
that failed?
Are you going to wait until 2 months before the next election and try to scramble again and do it? I do not think. I hope to God actually that this time that will not in fact work. So that almost immediately we have to see that new model emerging and the details of it being worked out in front of the population in a very, very transparent manner. So that if it stands a chance at all at believability or acceptability by the population, you know, it would be there.
Mary, do you think that there's a chance that the UNC and the ILP can kiss and make up?
Well, I would rather have turned the question on why are we still insisting on first past the post? Because whilst we have first past the post, other parties are totally out of any form of governance under those conditions. And we have been talking too long, and the COP has been running around the country talking about constitutional reform. And if we could have introduced it to local government election, why aren't we introducing proportional representation into our constitution so that the next time around, everyone who has got a particular number of votes has got a seat in the parliament. Whether we go total PR or whether we go the mixed system, which is preferable to some of us, we need to make that decision and we need to get on with it because the country has outgrown first past the post.
Winford, for 2015, is that a realistic expectation or pie in the sky? Do
Not
you see
going to
us
happen.
That's not the point.
It's not.
We need it.
No, he asked what is
realistic?
Yeah, and that's what I was responding to. I'm not talking about
What
the
we need.
feasibility of the concept.
People
But if he
have to
dates
make
it,
it
Mary,
realistic.
but if he dates it, if he says by 2015, one has to respond to that.
All right,
which is
I will
without
accept
prejudice
that.
to the
But-
reasonableness of the model.
But let's start the people thinking.
Well, people have been thinking
Thinking
for a
for a
long
long
time.
Well, we need to get them to
No,
act.
but more than that is how you can bring it about.
That's right.
To bring it about needs a certain amount of accommodation on both sides.
And discussion.
Right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I want to say that this PR story will take too much time to properly ventilate.
But that doesn't mean we
You know
should
what I mean?
ignore
Yeah.
it.
And
But
I
I
would
want
like
to
to
go
weigh in
back
here
to
quickly.
something that I hadn't finished with your permission.
Yes, just
Can I
let's
just weigh
hear
in
let's
in
hear
terms of-
India's thoughts on the
I-
PR, and then we'll go back.
I'm total agreement with Mary that we need to change the system of
System.
governance. We need that. But we've been saying that for a long time. We are now into what I think is either the third or the fourth incarnation of consultation on constitutional reform.
Yes.
The people in this country have spoken, you know, very loudly. I attended those consultations. And yet, when in opposition, governments seem to understand that and they support it.
But Indira, have
And
they
that's-
spoken in favor of PR
No,
in the
they have.
consultations?
Yes, people do. People say.
In their majority?
In certainly the ones that
Well,
I
nobody took it- nobody
participated
took a
in. No, in the ones
Nobody
that
took a
I,
vote.
in the versions, yes, people did. In fact, we had some versions
Yes.
put forward
Not
that
in
people
their
were very,
majority.
very much liking. But whatever version, we need to have that. We need to move it beyond the conversation.
Thank
Fair
you.
The
enough.
challenge is how.
How do we do
How
that?
do we do
Okay,
that?
while we consider that, let's see what Fane has for us as the latest update.
We're going to check in with what's happening at the PNM, where we understand the candidate Terence Dayal Singh has just arrived.
Yes, yes, you're at the center of victory here. Mr. Dayal Singh, just a quick word here from you about your victory, your impressions, your feelings right now.
I'm just so happy, so relieved, and this is a victory for all these people here. Thank God.
Did you ever anticipate it to be so tight a race?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry, I speak with you again. Again, Mr. Diyal Singh there, overwhelmed by supporters, mobbed by PNM supporters as he makes his way into the constituency office here in St. Joseph. And we know that Dr. Rowley is expected here shortly as well. Revelry, the center victory here. It's all happening here. Finn?
Thank you very much, Mark. Just to check in with why it is that the PNM is already taking their victory speech. Terrence Diyal Singh perhaps a little close once he gets out of that crowd to starting his victory lap. The leaderboard has changed considerably. You now see that Terrence Diyal Singh has crossed the 5,000 vote mark with a significant almost 600 vote lead ahead of the UNC's Ian Allen. Again, fitting with the pattern, we always heard that this was going to be a close race. We're going to check in now with the ILP. Jabari Fraser is there to take in what seems to be a somber mood. Jabari.
Yes, Fane, things are pretty much dead right here at the ILP camp in Aranguez, and I can tell you, I can give you an indication of the unofficial results that are being shown on these boards outside of the constituency office. And thus far, the ILP has 1,989 votes, the UNC 5,677 votes, and the PNM 6,357 votes. The PNM in front here up to now, and Errol Fabian, the independent candidate, 300 votes. The DNA, Michael Lopez, that candidate, 5 votes. And once again, we have 2 spoiled votes. We don't know if that is any indication of any intentional spoiling of the votes or anything of that sort. I can tell you that things are very quiet. There is a somber sort of blanketed mood over the ILP camp, and we've been told that Om Lala, the candidate, and Jack Warner, the political leader, are both expected here maybe in about 10 or 15 minutes. So we're waiting until they arrive. Fane?
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Jabari. And just to get you up to speed on those preliminary results that are a lot closer to what Jabari spoke about, we're seeing that preliminary results not yet verified by the returning officers show the PNM's candidate Terrence Diyal Singh ahead by about 600 votes. He's crossed the 6,000 vote mark here on this tally. If we look at the leaderboard of verified results, that's just a little bit different. Terrence Diyal Singh below that mark considerably. As you can see, there's a significant lag between what the returning officers verify and what's coming into the 3 political parties where our teams are stationed. We're going to have much more for you after the break, all the continuous coverage of the results. We'll be right back.
Still looking for building materials? Then look no further. At Docks Hardware, you will get more than you bargained for. Located at Warden Street and Diego Martin Main Road. Call Docks Hardware at 633 Docks. Best prices, best quality, best service.
I'm fine. There was a woman on a bicycle. I think I hit her. I heard my tire go.
Someone call 911. She's being crushed under there. Does anybody know CPR?
Can you hear me? I'm a doctor. She can't breathe. We gotta get this car out.
I'm on with 911. They say don't move her. The paramedics are on their way.
She can't breathe. She will die before they get here.
Look, I don't want to be responsible if she's paralyzed.
Don't you see she's dying under there? Do you want to be responsible for that?
The critically acclaimed medical drama Grey's Anatomy, Thursday at 9:02 p.m.
Welcome back. A look at UNC headquarters there in Aranguez. We've also heard from the PNM and the ILP. So now we go back to Martin and the panelists to hear what they think of the results and so far.
Thank you, Anselm. Winford, the somber mood in the ILP, is it an acceptance of defeat, or should they be looking to put a spin on this to show that, look, they do have the ability to make or break the results in the election?
Well, I thought that they could be in 2 kinds of mood, right? The somber mood, as you talked about, because they did win, especially if they had an expectation they would win. And I thought that was very optimistic if they did.
Yeah.
The second mood is the mood that should have come by their realizing that the UNC did not win. They should have been happy that the UNC did not win or is not going to win based on what they have been saying. And they have been relating that to the number of seats the UNC would have in the parliament. You follow? They were saying, look, if the UNC won that St. Joseph, they would have a clear majority where 2/3 where legislation requiring. I'm not so sure it's different now. I think they will end up with 27 seats, right?
Yeah.
So they still have the 2/3 majority.
Yes,
but the point is, they wanted to reduce that.
To ensure that it comes down. That's
so that should have fired them up a little bit. But if they're thinking of a rapprochement in the immediate future, an alliance, maybe there's some the somber mood, the sobriety that you are seeing, maybe it's in order.
In the circumstances.
If you're looking to come together, you know, in the near future.
And Indira, if it is that the results hold as we are seeing the trends seeming to pan out, what do you think would be the mood in the UNC camp?
I think the UNC is going to find some way to put a good spin on it, and I think they are going to try to send a message. See what I told you? If you split the votes, you know, that we really should have won, because I'm not sure if you add up the two, if you will, in fact, but I certainly think that tonight, I think if the Prime Minister speaks, I think she'll be very big about it. Yeah, and she will congratulate, but I think by and large, I don't know if you can move from a position of such strong arrogance and believing that this thing belonged to you to coming to terms with the reality. Because even up to now, we're hearing, when we hear the interviews, even tonight, even as the results are coming in their disfavor, we are hearing this very, very strong language still. I think that the UNC, which is now the government, really for the next, looking forward into the next 18 months, needs to take stock. You know, they need to, but they need to. If they do not take stock, then they are accepting defeat, because that is what will come ashore as night will turn into day.
May I engage Indira a little bit?
Yes, sure. I would like to hear that, particularly Winford. Bear in mind the Prime Minister's statement in the aftermath of the local government elections when she said, "We have retained our base, and I am still your Prime Minister."
Yes. Now, what I was going to ask Indira is, how many defeats would it take a Prime Minister to realize that the electorate in general has rejected your government?
Well, I guess,
how many defeats?
Well, I guess it depends on the Prime Minister.
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
this Prime Minister has a very high tolerance level with respect to translating defeat.
But it does speak about the marriage to power, the obsession with power, and not really having a sufficient democratic sense.
Yeah, and in another country, really, what we would see happen there would be the acceptance that I have had such a rejection by the population that I'm obligated to go back to the polls.
And these defeats, by the way, were self-inflicted. They came from within the bowels.
Correct. We were having that sidebar conversation, and it has been a refusal. The Prime Minister has said the voice of the people is the voice of God, but this party has refused to listen to the voice of the people that keeps speaking quite loudly over and over.
Well, could it be that she is saying the voice of the people shall only be heard in 2015? Mary, your thoughts on that?
Nice.
I think the arrogance of the UNC coming out with statements like we heard tonight, that the ILP is the spoiler party and they split the votes, and it really smacks of a lack of democracy and a lack of respect for the individual voter in the country. And therefore I think the people themselves are
when you add them together,
fed up of the arrogance, and I think, as Indira said, it's been obvious over the last 2 or 3 elections that they're declining in popularity. They most likely will have lost this seat should we not call fresh elections. But I really think that the PNM didn't help matters by calling a fresh election and losing it. So will she call election given what happened previously in 2010 and the PNM lost? But I think that they're so arrogant and so taken up imbibed with power that they will stay to the last minute unless the population speak, and speak loudly by telling them publicly that we really are going nowhere as a country. We have no economic plan. There is only a plan for spend on projects which are questionable as whether they are developmental. And I think it's time that the population speak to the Prime Minister, because she says, we are here to speak to you. I love you. I'm yours. So let us really live that and talk to the people and get guidance as to how and where we should be going.
Okay, and let's hear what the people of St. Joseph have said in terms of this election.
Absolutely, Martin. We have a very definitive pronouncement at this point to make. We have information so far that out of the roughly 27,000 voters registered in the constituency of St. Joseph, just over 50% of them have come out to vote. We have a turnout so far, based on ballots counted, of 14,328. In fact, what's remaining to be counted so far at this point in time, almost 4 hours after the close of polls, 5 polling stations remaining where ballots have not been counted in those 5 polling stations. That's out of a total of 53 polling stations in the entire constituency. How does this now affect the leaderboard? We're now seeing a 1,000 vote gap between PNM's Terence D'Alsing and his closest challenger, the UNC's Ian Allen. That would account, of course, for PNM declaring victory at this stage, which TV6 is now declaring at this point that the election has gone in the favor of the PNM and Terence D'Alsing. You see Omlala, the ILP, they're still hovering around the 2,000 vote mark, haven't quite made it there yet. Ian Allen still fighting to reach to that 5,000 vote mark as well. We're also going to just get you the latest coming in from the EBC, which is bolstering what we told you earlier in terms of the figures. Based on preliminary figures of the results in the St. Joseph by-election today, the People's National Movement collected 6,356 votes. We are edging towards that in the verified results. These are preliminary results, 6,356 votes. United National Congress secured 5,577 votes. The Independent Liberal Party, ILP, 1,976 votes. Independent candidate Errol Fabian, 300 votes, and the DNA Democratic National Assembly's Michael Lopez, 5 votes. And of course, the percentage who have voted so far, just over 50%. The verified results catching up to the EBC's preliminary results, which put Terence D'Alsing at this point in time at 6,356 votes, a margin of about 600 votes over the UNC's Ian Allen. Martin, curious to hear what the panel has to say.
Thank you, Fane. And one thing I think is certain, Fane, is that the one vote of Mr. Allen would not assist him, given the figures you have read out there. It doesn't seem that his one vote could have made a difference in this election. Your comments on that, Indira, in terms of what we heard developing and unfolding today with Mr. Allen?
You mean in terms of his inability to vote?
Well,
is it even really relevant at this point in time? You know, I think there are a lot more interesting things that we can talk about. For example, I mean, you know, I think you know, what does the ruling party do at this point in time after this number of defeats? You know, how do you continue to govern for the time that is left in any meaningful way that can show difference? I think that the Prime Minister still has quite a bit of goodwill in this country, the Prime Minister, and I think that has been facilitated by this general notion that it is not her, but it is this cabal around her that is making all the wrong decision. Whether we agree or disagree with that, I think is for a different discussion. But if that is in fact the case, maybe the Prime Minister has an opportunity here to pull out a new deck of cards and to give the population something else that they could possibly rally around, that could strengthen her position in looking forward to 2015, because I think that's where we really need to look to at this point.
At this point, yes.
2015.
Thank you. Winford, in terms of the issues surrounding Mr. Alain today, does it speak to a lack of proper preparation on behalf of the government in, I guess, the selection process, the screening process? We recall also that his candidacy was announced almost at the 11th hour, very late in the day, particularly for a government which called and announced the election. Is there anything that we can look at and take lessons from in terms of how the government approached that entire process?
Well, ideally, the UNC could have done better in screening a better candidate. But if it is that we have gone back to ethnicity-based politics, if we have gone back to the marginality that, constituted the kind of voting that we did, that described it well, then it didn't matter whether it was Ian or anybody else. You know about the notion of the crapo?
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say.
The crapo.
It's our history.
Think of the crapo. You can put up anybody else. If you go back to ethnic voting, a crapo would do.
That's where we are.
Ian Alain turned out to be a crapo.
Mary, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, what else can you say? I think it's true.
Well
but we're being told by Ian Alain a week before he was nominated that he was not political, he wasn't going to be a candidate. He couldn't vote because apparently he doesn't live in the constituency, and yet he told us 2 days ago, I am one of you, I live here, I live there, my granny did this, and my grandfather that, and my father this. The man has not been honest, so the public see that the man has not been honest, and they could have chosen a candidate that perhaps would have had more credibility with the population.
And at that point, we will take a commercial break for some honest advertising.
Honest advertising.
Next hostages, you don't get to kill the president and keep your hands clean.
Mom and Dad should be here by now. Something went wrong.
He's bleeding out. Clear!
You're right, Mrs. Sanders, you're bleeding. He tried to escape. Time to pay for that.
Dylan McDermott is in the crime drama Hostages, Wednesday at 9 p.m. exclusively on TV6.
No other drama on television brings together stars like this, all in one episode.
You're good. Thank you.
And prepare yourself.
You used my wife.
For an election shocker.
I thought it only fair to warn you.
The Good Wife, Thursday at 8 p.m. on CCN TV6.
Good evening, viewers. Welcome back to TV6's election night coverage. Well, as you heard just now, Fane told you that Dayal Singh has came away the winner in the St. Joseph by-election. So now we're going to look at social media to hear what people are saying, how they're reacting to this victory. First, we look at Jillian Empress on Twitter. Her tweet goes something like this: I truly feel sorry for the PP. In 2010, most of the country were behind you. Reflection time as Prime Minister. Well, at least you're still PM. TV6 TNT. We have a second tweet from President of the Red Man Association. That awkward moment when you can count the people who voted for you on one hand, still slinging away at the DNA candidate. And one more tweet for you here. Looking forward for Kamla's victory speech. LOL. That's what we have right now. We go into Jabari at the ILP headquarters. Jabari.
Thank you, Anselm. We are here at the ILP coup headquarters, or the constituency office rather, and there's a bit of a crowd. The candidate for St. Joseph, Umlala, just arrived a couple of minutes ago. I don't know if you would have seen it on the feed that we had up, but we are expecting that he will make a statement to media in about 3 to 5 minutes or so. He just went inside to have a chat with other party officials and to get a sense of what's happening now. The unofficial votes are way ahead of the official votes that we've been giving you, and thus far one polling station is outstanding. Results from that station are outstanding, and from all indications the PNM is in front, as you would have seen the celebratory atmosphere at the PNM constituency office. That's all we have here for now. We are going to bring you interviews with Umlala and Jack Warner if he comes to the constituency office here at in Arangwes rather. Anselm?
Thank you very much, Jabari. So as we see contrasting atmospheres at the both camps, the PNM is more a party celebration time of move, and at the ILP it's more of a somber, more like a wake. Back to you, Martin and the panelists.
Thank you. And I heard Jabari say that we are waiting on Mr. Warner and Mr. Lala. I am particularly hoping to hear from Mr. Montano. He has a way of putting things so perfectly. I would love to hear his speech after this. Thoughts on this, Indira?
Sorry.
The speeches that we expect.
Oh, okay. Well, I expect, I'm particularly interested to hear from the ILP, because I think we'll get a sense tonight in terms of what is in their short term, where they